In my career working in AI, I have yet to meet a single person that ever felt like they had enough compute.
I could not ask for a better guest. Andrew Ng, globally recognized leader in AI.
Data centers are the critical infrastructure for building the digital economy. I think that open weight models is a tremendous source of geopolitical influence. The work ethic, the velocity, when China's government makes an all-nation commitment, it's an all-industrial commitment, that's actually a very powerful force that I wouldn't underestimate.
Ready to go? Andrew, I've been an admirer for a long time, so I've been really looking forward to making this happen. So thank you so much for joining me today.
No, yeah. Thank you, Harry. Watch a bunch of shows. I really enjoyed your recent one with my friend Martin Casado as well. That was very memorable. So I'm actually thrilled to be here.
I love Martin. Very, very special man. I want to start with something that you've said before. You said AI is the new electricity. And when I think about electricity and where we are today, I want to understand the bottlenecks. And everyone seems to suggest that it really is about data, compute, and algorithms. Is that the three parameters to which we should think about bottlenecks? And if so, which one do you think is the biggest bottleneck?
I would say the two biggest bottlenecks right now, it may be, I think electricity is one of them. So in the US, I am honestly worried that many data center operators were stuck in kind of permitting and, and I know that local community support is important and some people don't want a data center there. But, once we build roads and railways as the infrastructure for a certain generation, data centers are the critical infrastructure for building the digital economy. And so lack of electricity in America and in a number of Western countries is a problem. And in contrast, I see China building power plants left and right, including nuclear. So that will be an interesting dynamic. And then semiconductors is another bottleneck. But AI is so complicated. I think we also need more data. We also need more better algorithms. All of it is worth working on. But in the short term, some constraints with electricity and semiconductors.
Can you talk to me about the constraints around semiconductors that you think are most pressing that most people don't realize?
First, in my career working in AI, I have yet to meet a single AI person that ever felt like they had enough compute. So, get us any amount of compute, we will use it all up and say we still don't have enough. So this is a constraint for the last 20 years or so. But what I'm seeing is, with the rise of Gen AI, there are very valuable workloads. For example, AI assisted coding, it's fantastic. It's making us so much more productive. But if you use Cloud Code enough, sometimes you get rate limited. And I find that many companies have excess demand, which is a very rare problem to have. But so many people want more LLM inference, want more tokens generated, and we just don't have the semiconductors and the data centers and electricity to meet the demand. But, there's a lot we could do with AI token generation. And it's frustrating when we can't, when on the supply side, we can't supply enough to people that want it. On the demand side, you get rate limited if you use too much.
How should I think about that insatiable need for more compute and the improvements that come from it, with the recognition that many people say GPT-5 was the example that scaling laws have been reached to a certain extent and a focus on efficiency has been a transition? How should I balance those two seemingly differing opinions?
So it is true that token generation is getting more efficient and cheaper. In fact, if you look at OpenAI's open weight model, they actually release models that are very efficient to run. So I think they did a good job with was it like 120 billion parameters or something, with I think 5.7 billion active. So it's actually a very efficient model to run. But despite the cost of token generation falling, our demand for it is insatiable. One interesting thing that's happened in AI is, if we look at where the buckets of value, one of the big buckets of value is AI assisted coding. And I think this harkens back to an earlier era. In a previous generation, I think Google came to dominate horizontal information discovery like web search, but there's room for lots of verticals when the internet was being built. So we wound up with, Travelocity and Expedia fought out for travel, bunch of folks fought out in retail, a bunch of others fought out in transportation, social media, and so on. What we're seeing now is ChatGPT has such a strong consumer brand. ChatGPT seems to be the dominant player in the new gen horizontal information discovery. Although I think Gemini, with its channel advantage through control of Android and Chrome, is a serious player as well. But if that's where horizontal information turns out to be, then there's still plenty of room for lots of verticals to be built out. And one of the clear buckets of really valuable verticals is AI coding assistance, where Claude Code is, I use that every day, love it. OpenAI Codex has a lot of momentum as well, but it's clearly making developers so much more productive and efficient that the demand is just through the roof for let's use more and more of this. One thing I find exciting is I often look at AI coding assistance as a harbinger for what might happen to other job functions as well, as the AI marketing tools become more efficient, as the AI recruiting tools become more efficient, AI finance tools become more efficient. So I often look at AI coding assistance as maybe a foreshadowing of what may happen as well to other sectors as the tools get better for them too.
I had Joel Pineau from Cohere and formerly of Facebook on the show recently, and she said that AI coding assistants are in the same place that maybe image generation was in 2016, 2017 in terms of maturity. Do you think that's a fair state of the environment today, or do you not think so?
I don't know. I think it's further along. I think in 2016, image generation wasn't super valuable. I don't remember it being that valuable back then, but I think today, AI coding assistance is really, actually, at AI Fund, my head of engineering recently, I would say, hey, let's think about standardizing on tools. And, basically, he said, I need these tools and you have to pry them out of my code dead hands, right? I think our developers feel really strongly. I myself, I don't ever want to have to code again without AI coding assistance. So I think the tools are really working well, but still with a lot of headroom for how much better it can get.
I do just want to go back to the kind of the core bottlenecks. We said there about electricity and we said there about semiconductors. Yeah, I think when we look at like the build out of data centers today, as you said, regulation has been a big part of preventing that in a lot of ways. Do you think Trump has done more to help or to hurt the progression of AI in the United States from an infrastructure perspective?
Over the last few years, the US federal government has done some good things and some less helpful things. I feel like clearing out unnecessary regulations has been a very good move. Even last year, the bipartisan Schumer AI Insight Forum, I think there are a lot of people lobbying the US government to pass stifling regulations. There are a lot of hyped up AI safety narratives saying AI could lead to human extinction, which I think is kind of a ridiculous statement. To try to get stifling anti-competitive regulations passed, often to try to shut down open source, open weight. Fortunately, we beat back a lot of that, but I think the bipartisan Schumer Insight Forum did a really good job digging into the truth and concluding that America should be investing in AI rather than, passing unnecessary regulations to slow it down. I think Trump did a good job, and then his whole team, David Sachs and Christian and so on, did a good job clearing out unnecessary regulations. On the flip side, one of America's huge competitive advantages has been this ability to attract talent, including high school talent, as well as, frankly, young talent that may not currently be high school, but could be high school in the future. And so I think, to the extent that America is, not investing as much in attracting talent, I think that would be an unforced error. And then I think lastly, investments in science, right? I think helping our institutions of higher education have the resources to train our grad students, to invest in science and technology, I think that's really precious. And so anything that damages that, I think would also be very unfortunate.
If I gave you a regulatory magic wand, Andrew, what would you change that would have the most significant needle-moving impact?
America is fortunate to have a lot of very smart people wanting to come here to do really challenging, really tough problems. Many of our Nobel laureates are immigrants. Einstein, canonical example, was an immigrant. I think continuing to cultivate America as a place to attract great talent to work together in a place in a democratic nation that respects the rule of law. I think that would help us move ahead. I think that securing the semiconductor supply chain would be very valuable as well. A lot of friends in Taiwan. I love Taiwan. And also, America's dependency on TSMC, is concerning in case anything happens. And then I think and frankly, there's one very funny thing that happened in society, which is, there was recently a Pew report showing, I think, how much Americans, think AI would be good for them, enthusiastic for it versus not enthusiastic. And even though a lot of AI technologies were invented in America, a lot of people don't trust or don't like AI.
The joys of what I do, Andrew, is I get to speak to incredible people and then kind of cross-reference what they say. David Kahn from Sequoia said, hey, a really useful barometer for effectiveness is, can AI replace the bottom 5% of capabilities of what a workforce does? Joel from Cohere said, no, that's crap. The real question is, can it 10x people's ability? Forget the bottom 5%, can it 10x? How do you think about a barometer for success of the workforce with AI, with those in mind?
In the case of software engineering, it is accelerating the writing of code. There are so many projects that used to take, 6 engineers half a year to build, that today I or one of my engineers can build in a weekend. I hope that we never have to go back to coding without AI assistance again, because the acceleration, the productivity boost is incredible. I mean, for example, one weekend I thought, I want to, my daughter, I wanted flashcards for my daughter to practice multiplication. She wanted to practice multiplication. She wanted flashcards. So I thought I could either drive to the store and buy a bunch of flashcards for her, or I could just, use AI to write code for me to generate and print out a bunch of flashcards. And so I did the latter. And so this is a very low economic value task, but with AI assisted coding, I could get that done very quickly.
Do you think vibe coding is an enduring market? Do you think everyone will want to code and accessibility is important? Or do you think it bluntly just allows builders to build better and more efficiently?
I think we need all of the above. I've had mixed feelings about the term vibe coding, but nitpicking terminology aside, I think everyone should learn to code. What I'm seeing is, for a lot of job roles that aren't just software engineering, people that can code can get more done than people that can't code. For example, I think my marketer wanted to run a user survey once, and she wanted something for people to give live feedback. And she looked at the app store, couldn't find anything. So she said, you know what? I'm going to spend 2 days to code up. It take her 2 days. But my marketer then built a little mobile app where users could swipe, left or right to give feedback on some marketing messages we want to user test. And because of that, we're able to run user experiments, get feedback, and so it helped her do her job better as a marketer. Whereas in contrast, a marketer that couldn't code up a little app to, let people swipe around and give feedback, they would just not have been able to do this, would not have gotten feedback, would not have been able to move forward. Today, my best recruiters, not only do they screen resumes by hand, they are writing prompts to get AI to help them screen resumes. And it's been interesting.
Which is amazing. But going to your point on people shouldn't be fearful and they are fearful. You see that would lead to efficiency gains, which mean headcount reductions. If you can screen so much more with AI, I'm not into this kind of fear mongering. But if you can screen a lot more with AI, I don't need my 3 other analysts.
I think there's a small subset of jobs that, frankly, are in trouble. But I think for the vast majority of knowledge workers, actually, here's one thing about hype. AI is amazing. There's a lot of stuff it can't do. So this phantom AGI, someday with AI that can do everything a human can do, I think we're very far away from that. I would say, decades away, maybe even longer. And the trick is, if AI could do 30% of a recruiter's job, who knows, maybe 50%, although that feels a little bit high. There's another 50 to 70% of stuff that we still need the human to do. But it's also clear that if you use AI and someone doesn't, that's actually a huge difference in what you can accomplish. So better, much better off using AI. But because AI can't do everything, there's still plenty of work that we still need humans to do for a lot of job roles.
Do you not think we have a white collar talent pipeline problem though, which is whether you're a consultant or you're a legal associate, in the junior ranks, a lot of what you can do is being replaced by AI, and they are actually cutting juniors. You're seeing this across the board. And so what's the fear is we're going to have this talent hole where in 10 years' time, there's no juniors to go up into seniors because we've replaced them.
Yeah, I don't think it's as dire as that. I think there is a big problem, but I don't think it's exactly that problem. So let me tell you what I'm seeing in software engineering. The most productive engineers I know, they're not fresh college grads. They are people of 10, 20 years of experience or whatever, and really on top of AI and know the AI tools and understand AI code. So those people, experienced and on top of AI, move faster than anything the world has seen even 1 or 2 years ago. One tier down is actually a fresh college grads that are really on top of AI. So I've hired, quite a few people, fresh college grads, that for whatever reason, through the social network community, really learn the AI tools, and they move really fast, but they're not as good as people experience that know AI. One tier down from the fresh college grads is the people with 10 years of coding experience, but who had a comfortable job and for whatever reason is still coding like it's 2022 before ChatGPT. Those people, I just don't hire people like that anymore. But there are people that, they're the comfortable job, they kept coding the old way, and they just did not learn AI. I think those people may get into trouble at some point. But there's one other one, which is the tier that is in trouble, which is the fresh college grads that don't know AI. One unfortunate thing is university curricula is slow to change. And so I actually feel pretty bad that even today, there are universities graduating CS undergrads that have not made a single call to a single API on the internet, right? And imagine graduating a CS undergrad that has never heard of cloud computing. It's like, what is a cloud? Oh, I don't need to just run things. That's weird. You just can't be a CS major and not know how to do things in the cloud. And I feel like I'm getting to the point where I don't think it's right. I feel like we've got to not train CS majors without also making sure they know how to use AI to help them with coding, without also making them know the AI building blocks. But university curriculum, and that's a cohort of students that are entering the job market that's really struggling. But the fresh college grads know AI. We can't find enough of them. So many businesses would love to hire those fresh college grads.
I just want to touch on the 10x, 100x engineers that you said are just amazing. We're seeing pay packets, compensation brands, larger than they've ever been. $3.5 billion in certain cases for a single engineer. Are these justified pay packages given the impact that they are having on companies' enterprise value? Or is this bubble-like pay packages that we should be concerned by?
I don't know. It is really hard to say. I know a number of people that have gotten really huge pay packages. I'm actually very happy for them. I think it's great, the funding going into, pay AI people really well.
I mean it nicely. Do you think it's like $100 million for an engineer? I worry that you're just not going to be as productive. Like if I give you $100 million overnight, God, you might buy a nice house and go on holiday and, you lose a bit of efficiency.
I don't know. I have a lot of Silicon Valley friends that, for whatever reason have made a little bit of money. Many of them just keep working really, really hard. But equally before and after, they wound up making a little bit of money. So I find that, a lot of the tech culture, we do stuff because it's fun, because it lets us, hopefully help other people is a way to change the world. I find that, wealth makes people become lazy much less than one might guess.
I'm intrigued to see how you think about this. You said all the different ways that it could impact many different verticals there, and you said we overhype, doomsday scenarios and everything in between. Andre Carpathy recently said AGI will just blend into 2% GDP growth, which I thought sounded a little bit unexciting, to be honest, Andrew. I wanted some seismic shift in productivity increase. Do you think a blend into 2% GDP growth is what you expect? Or do you expect a much more significant 5-6% like Masa at SoftBank expects?
I hope we can get much closer to 5, 6 or more percent GDP growth. When looking to the future, it turns out one of the most expensive things in today's world is intelligence. This is why it's so expensive, at least in the US, to hire a highly skilled doctor to advise us on the medical condition, or hire a highly skilled tutor to, patiently teach our kids, because that intelligence, training up that wise doctor, wise teacher, wise advisor is very expensive. But with AI, we finally have a path to make intelligence cheap. And so in the future, if everyone can be assisted by an army of smart, well-informed staff on all of these topics under the sun that currently only the relatively wealthy in society can afford to hire people for, then individuals will be so much more empowered and able to get so much more done. And that highly empowered individual, lives will be so different, and the GDP growth will be massive.
Totally get that and agree. Kind of speaking about that democratization of knowledge there and the benefits that come from it. You said a word before, which was open, about kind of the open weights ecosystem that we've seen. We've seen this reversion back to like a closed world in a lot of cases. How do you feel about the reversion back to a closed? And how do you analyze the state of play today in that open versus closed?
It's still very dynamic. I think it is, so for a lot of American companies, the leading frontier model is often kept closed, and then the one tier down model, not quite as good as released as open. I think it's much better than nothing. I'm actually grateful for all the teams that are releasing open source, open weight models. And then the other dynamic is, China especially has been really taking the lead, taking a lead or getting up there in terms of releasing tons of really good open weight models. So I would say, if not, it's kind of not what I would have predicted, a decade ago, that China AI would end up being more open than America AI. And I think...
Why do you think China is wanting an open AI world?
It turns out that openness is great for a country's development. So it turns out that when a team releases open source software, circulation of knowledge is much faster to the close-by community. And so what I see is when a team in China releases an open weight model, then yes, of course, America can take advantage of it, but the China economy benefits even more from it, because once something is open, it's easier for teams to call each other and say, hey, buddy, how does this really work? I'm having trouble with this part of the model. It's just that circulation of knowledge is really valuable for innovation. And when the US has more closed models, and when, teams are trying to pay these $100 million salaries to extract talent, then that circulation of knowledge becomes very slow, and it slows down the rate of American and European innovation.
With the commoditization of the model layer, though, and the kind of opening of it, it actually increases the premium on manufacturing and the ability to manufacture at scale, which China have a much greater ability to do than the US. Do you not think that actually leads a lot of their thinking around why they want to remove the strength of US models?
In addition to increase innovation and circulation of knowledge, which the open weight models helps with, I think that open weight models is a tremendous source of geopolitical influence. So, for example, if someday, some kid in some developing nation ask a question about a politically sensitive topic, or ask, hey, where are the national borders in this case, or what's the history of this event or that event? The country of origin of the model they end up using will be delivering some answer, and whether the answer skews towards one nation's values or another nation's values is actually a tremendous source of influence and soft power. Like it or not, open weight models are a key part of the AI supply chain, and China releasing, free, low cost or free models into that key part of supply chain means is really starting to build up a lead, right? In build up a commanding user base, and that too will be a source of, and this is why I think nations with a strong media and entertainment industry, it turns out South Korea has vastly proportionate disproportionate influence because of their leading entertainment industry. So people listen to whatever, K-pop or whatever, and that buys the nation a lot of influence. Hollywood was a tremendous source of soft power for America. It paints a certain vision of the American dream, talks about the values of freedom and democracy. And I think this is another frontier of communications and soft power.
You have the most fascinating perspective, having obviously spent many years at Google and then obviously Baidu as well. And so having been on both sides of the table in certain respects, we have this kind of strange binary polarization of the AI race, China versus the US. Do you agree with that positioning of China versus the US in an AI race?
I think there's a lot of room for cooperation, and then also some places that will be competitive. So first, while people sometimes, even me, talk about the AI race, there's no single finish line. It's not one race. AI is a general purpose technology, and you could be better or worse at coding, better or worse at answering questions, better or worse at helping with, marketers and finance and so on. So AI has many different capabilities, and there's no one finish line. And even as one capability, I think we're going to keep on improving for a long time. So I feel like because of PR goals, AGI has been hyped up as if it was a finish line, but I don't think it's a finish line. It's just we'll have continually improving capabilities for, decades to come. Having said that, nations with stronger AI capabilities are going to be more powerful. The citizens will be more prosperous. The economies will grow faster. So I think so to the extent that different nations' incentives are not aligned, nations with more powerful AI capabilities will be able to do more. Just like, if a country has a fantastic electricity grid and another country, has power outages and so on, well, one country can just use the electricity grid to do more manufacturing, more industrial work, just do a lot more that way.
Do you not think we still underestimate China's ability, though? I mean, I think we definitely do in Europe, but I think in the US, respectfully, I see a lot of US arrogance around your positioning. And then you go to China, and you've been to China and spent huge amounts of time in China. You realize the speed and the intensity with which they move. It's a different level to both Europe and the US.
Yeah, to be fair, I think US, Europe, China all have problems as well. But having said that, I think the work ethic, the velocity, when China's government makes an all-nation commitment, it's an all-industrial commitment, that's actually a very powerful force with kind of state-level investments in semiconductors, in its education system. So, like K-12 kids being trained to use AI, businesses also use AI, share knowledge, and then sometimes, build this stuff and also sell internationally with state apparatus that may or may not be the whole. That's actually and then control over rare earth elements. So I think that whole of economy, whole of country efforts is actually a very powerful force that I wouldn't underestimate.
Given that, we shouldn't underestimate it, do you think it's right that we have export controls on chips? Obviously NVIDIA has had a lot of export controls back and forth. Do you think that's right or not?
I think the export control on chips has largely backfired. The way that the U.S. and I think the way the U.S. first put restrictions on Huawei, and then later on, export of NVIDIA and AMD and other semiconductors, that really incentivized China. So before the export controls, semiconductor development in China, frankly, it wasn't moving that fast. It was a nice area. There was some investment. But when America did that, then China really accelerated its semiconductor development. And so America incentivized China to do this, and it is paying off for China. I think your number of Chinese companies are building offerings that the individual chips are less powerful, but maybe a much larger number of chips, trying to build offerings competitive with certainly the last generation of NVIDIA, maybe increasingly the current generation. So I think if I were to analyze just purely, U.S. national self-interest, I think that caused China to accelerate its semiconductor industry in a way that may not be helpful to the U.S. long term.
I sit in Europe. I obviously live in London. You told me you were born in London before this. My question to you is, it transparently feels like we are very far behind, and people say, oh, you've already lost. How do you feel about Europe's position in a very new world? And what can Europe do to regain some semblance of equality between the US and China?
If I had one wish for the European regulators, I spoke with quite a few European regulators, I was hearing things like, we want to be leaders in regulating AI, and that's a competitive advantage. And with all due respect, that's not a competitive advantage. So my one wish for Europe is stop regulating so much and just focus on investing and building. The thing is, it's still early in the days of AI. It's still early in the game. And Europe has plenty of smart people. Let people work hard. Don't force them to not work hard. Let people that want to work hard, and stop over-regulating and just go and invest and build stuff.
Where do we most need to be investing where we are not investing enough?
There's tons of capital going into data centers and infra. We can debate, is there a bubble or not? We definitely need a lot of investments. Are we, getting to the point where people are using such esoteric financial instruments to find cash for it that there'll be a bubble? We could debate that, right? So we definitely need a lot of investments, but when does it become overinvestment? That's an interesting question. The other place that I think we need to invest in a lot is not just the infra data center foundation model layer, but the application layer, because of others having spent, billions of dollars to train these AI models. We can now access them for, hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars or whatever, or tens of dollars. So it's wonderful to build tons of applications that just were not possible before. Now, from a VC investment perspective, I've heard from multiple VCs, is bizarrely, the cost of trying something out is so low that there are fewer ideas. It's not quite sure where to put massive amounts of capital to work at the application layer. In fact, if you look at a lot of the application layer investments, sometimes it feels like, firms are putting in $100 million so that they can pay Open and Anthropic, so that Open and Anthropic can pay NVIDIA, which is where all the money is ending up. Having said that, there's so many valuable bets to be placed at the application layer to just build stuff. But the dilemma is, you could do it in a very capital efficient way. So if someone wants to say, I want to put $10 billion to work, yes, you can build $10 billion worth of data centers. We know how to spend that money. But how do you spend $10 billion in building applications? The problem is almost, it only cost me $1 million to try an idea out. So how do I spend $10 billion? It's kind of a problem and also not a problem, but I think we should.
Does it? Because when you look at AI margins, margins for AI application layer companies, they're terrible. They make no money. They cost a lot of money to build because you have large engineering teams that build them. They cost more, not less.
I think it still varies. I'm seeing a lot of green shoots of software applications that were not that expensive to build. And if your LM token usage is not, the majority of your expense.
If you look at a Replit or a Lovable, 80% of their pass-through is to Anthropic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the dynamic that I'm excited about is, it turns out, I think Anthropic, I think that as token costs continue to come down, we'll see how the economics change, right? Right now, token is just expensive, but hopefully that will change, and the value created is really large. Actually, I remember an earlier era, in early days of food delivery, for example. I saw this in both the US and China. There's a lot of VC subsidized eating, right? It was great. We could eat food delivered. It was basically VC subsidized. I think we're seeing that right now with a lot of VC subsidized, AI coding. The laws of physics or the laws of finance says that at some point, right, this can't go on forever. But where it settles down will be that I think there will be some very valuable businesses that are not perpetually VC subsidized, but navigating this crazy VC subsidy world to get to a good outcome takes a lot of skill. But having said that, I still want to say there are a lot of smaller applications that are not yet doing these, hundreds of millions of dollars. Maybe they're doing millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars of revenue that haven't been quite expensive to build and to operate, and that I think we'll see continue to grow.
Speaking of kind of the smaller niches, so to speak, there that continue to grow, how do you think about the question of, you mentioned earlier brilliantly that articulation of kind of horizontal and then the verticals beneath them, and Google and now OpenAI being the horizontal. How do you think about the question of a world of large monolithic models versus much smaller, much more efficient, much more specialized models? How do you think about that? And has your mindset changed around which will be more dominant?
I think it's good. It'll be all of the above. We will have large models and mid-sized models and tiny small models. And the reason I'm confident about that is because the nature of intelligence is diverse, right? Sometimes we do intellectually really easy tasks. Like if someone asks me, I don't know, all right, yesterday my daughter, she misspelled the word butterfly. So I need to tell her how to spell butterfly. It's an easy intellectual task. And sometimes I'm sitting down thinking for hours about some, complex, like technical problem, right? And that's really hard. And so intelligence has a range of things we want to do. And so the set of things we want AI to do too has a huge range. If you want AI to do basic grammar checking and spell checking, you don't need a trillion parameter model. Use a tiny model, maybe running locally, just do that. But if you wanted to do complex reasoning, to write a piece of code, then yes, having a powerful model is going to do better. And so I'm actually very confident we'll end up with a huge range of models, small and large, to do the huge range of tasks. Just like we have humans do a range of tasks of difficulty, same with AI.
Does that mean that you disagree with Andre Karpathy when he said that useful agents are a decade away?
I disagree with that. I think we're seeing useful agentic workflows right now. So AI Fund, our team has built so many agentic workflows for so many tasks where, we just could not even do the task, but for agentic workflow.
Can you give me an example? I'm fascinated.
Over a year ago, we thought that this is actually after one of the Biden-Trump debates. For better or worse, we thought that tariff compliance may become an issue. Maybe, unfortunately, we turned out to be right. But so last year, I think it was around August, we started exploring building technology to help with tariff compliance. And by the way, I don't know if you've seen these tariff compliance docs, but frankly, when I look at what it takes to file this paperwork, is like, it makes me wonder, oh my God, what is this? So, you say import a bicycle, then you look at the specs of the bicycle, how much does it cost, the size of the wheels, there are all these rules and regulations to like import a bicycle. It just makes me go, oh my God, are humans really doing this? So we built agentic workflows, to read the tariff compliance documents carefully, get the spec for what someone wants to import carefully, try to match, make suggestions. And so this is now one of our portfolio companies called Gaia Dynamics that, because of the increased complexity in tariff compliance has been doing pretty well. Right. And so I find that we just could not have done this without agentic workflows. With medical assistants, we have different startups, AI fund portfolio companies, medical assistant operating in India, AI assistant Calidus, helping process legal documents. Many of these workloads we just could not do. So I find that there are useful AI agentic workflows already today, and the large businesses too, not just our startups. When we look at the hyperscalers, and I chat to friends in some of the large businesses, there's a bunch of internal workflows that, we just could not be doing without these AI agents.
When we think about a core of a business, it's margins, and most of these businesses don't have margins. Do you care about margins when investing today? Or with absolute respect, and it sounds disrespectful, do you take the kind of utopian view that it will just correct itself with time and with efficiency gains?
At some point, the laws of physics, I think, or the laws of finance or something, margins do matter. But one of the tricky things about AI is we know the technology is going to change. So we don't build assuming the technology will be stagnant. We do build assuming the technology will evolve. So one obvious one, token prices have been rapidly falling, right? Depending on who you believe, falling 80% year on year, whatever. Frankly, when we build prototypes, we routinely just not worry about token costs, because the first most important thing is let's build a product that users love. And then what we find is after we build something, this actually happened to me a few times now. We'll build something and not worry about the cost. And then, users start to use it. And then our API bill starts climbing. And then it is really like kind of, you're looking at this every few weeks and you go, whoa, this is getting really expensive. This is costing me salary of one engineer, costing me more than two engineers, costing me more than a whole bunch of engineers. All right. But fortunately, when that has happened, almost every time so far, we've been able to use techniques to bend the cost curve back down even faster than the rate at which token prices are falling in the market. And so I find that, absolute margins are important, but when you have a view for where the technology is going, then it lets you not build for the margins today, but what you can forecast them being in the future. And I think that's an important distinction. But we don't take a blind utopian, AGI, blah, blah, blah view either. I think that's also overly simplistic.
How do you think about defensibility in an AI world? A lot of people suggest that the time to copy is reduced significantly, that defensibility itself is questioned in AI. Do you agree with that and the questioning of defensibility today or not?
Moats are changing. So I find that moats tend to be a function of the industry rather than a function of the technology. So AI as a technology doesn't really offer an answer to the moat for most businesses. So if you're building AI, for drones or legal or for whatever, the moat is more of a function of that industry. But one thing that is changing with regard to moats is previously software used to be a moat, right? If you had, invested 10 years to build a software, it's really hard to replicate that. That one moat is much weaker than before. But other moats, like, are you trying to use AI to accelerate to build a two-sided marketplace, which can be very defensible? Or, are you building for a consumer, more for consumer and enterprise? Are there brand and reputational effects, right? That can help you build defensibility there. So I find that the software mode has changed, but other modes tend to be analysis based on the industry.
Okay, so software modes have changed. Fantastic. And so we now have margins that matter, but we have a little bit more elasticity there. The software mode has changed. In terms of the ability to stay relevant for large enterprises, what are the single biggest barriers that are preventing large enterprises from implementing AI aggressively and prevent themselves being extinct?
I think the biggest barrier in most large enterprises is actually people and change management.
Not data.
It's not data. I think it's definitely not data. Not that data is not important, but that's definitely not the bottleneck. I think data is so the interesting thing about AI hype is there's almost always a gem of truth in the hype. It's just that it's been hyped up, 10 times more than the reality. And maybe actually, let me give one example. Then I'll come back to data. There's been this buzz about, with AI, we'll have unicorns with one employee, right? It's like a thing. And it's fine. If you want to build a unicorn startup, $1 billion with one employee, go for it. It's a good thing to do. But frankly, if you have $1 billion valuation, you could afford to pay 2 employees or even 10. So why do you need to hype it all the way up to say, let's do this with just one employee, right? So it is true that team sizes are shrinking. We can get more done with smaller teams. So that is true. But the hype is then saying, let's build a unicorn with one startup. I find a lot of AI hype is so hard to disentangle because there's a gem of truth in it. It's just been hyped up a lot more. So on data, data is important. But it turns out that data is very verticalized and you don't need as much of it to get started as you want, as you think. So for example, LandingAI does a lot of work with financial institutions, healthcare. A lot of financial institutions have plenty of transaction data, take the PDF file, turn it into ready markdown text, go process that, find value in that. Like for example, we could, take SEC filings, large complex financial tables, very accurately turn those financial tables into Excel spreadsheets, then go get your analysts or your AI to analyze that and draw conclusions. So you could do that. So often with a bit of scrappiness, looking at internal data, looking at, public data, you can often get some stuff going. And it turns out that, a lot of internet data is kind of general purpose data. Most of the world's data is actually private, right? And so a lot of businesses actually very valuable transaction data, sales data, product data, manufacturing data, logistics data, and all that data with a scrappy team that knows how to use it can actually start to build something, get value out of it. Not to say more data wouldn't be even better, but you're not stuck to even take the first few steps for lack of data.
Andrew, I speak to many CEOs of these size businesses and they say, Harry, are you kidding me? You think we can get security and permissioning for our data and our enterprise? No, we don't have Slack. We don't have Notion. Everything is custom built. You're seeing the likes of JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs absolutely refuse any ChatGPT use, building internal systems. Is that the world that we inhabit for enterprise AI adoption?
I think we'll get there. So I find that a lot of enterprises are adopting LLMs, ChatGPT and many others. I think today there's still businesses that are still on-prem rather than on the cloud, but we're making progress. And it'll take, actually, one thing about AI, this hype that we have AGI in 2 years or whatever, I think that's just ridiculous. That's just, for most reasonable definitions of AGI, that's just not going to happen. And just as, how long are we now into the cloud era, but we still have an awful lot of on-prem jobs? I think that AI adoption, it will be wonderful. There will be tremendous GPT growth. It's also going to take much longer than the hype says it will. I actually think that a decade from now, we will still be working to identify valuable applications in enterprises and building them. Having said that, we will make a lot of progress over the next 1 or 2 years, but we're not going to be done, even 10 years from now.
What else does everyone think they know about AI and its adoption and implementation that they get wrong?
Even earlier this year, we saw some senior business leaders advise people to not learn to code on the grounds that AI will automate it. We'll look back on that as some of the worst career advice ever given. As coding becomes easier with AI assisting us, a lot more people should learn to code, not fewer. And I'm already seeing, I mentioned the marketing example just now with building an app for feedback, swiping. But I think for a lot of job functions, people that know how to tell a computer exactly what they wanted to do so the computer can do it for you, they'll just be more powerful. And for the foreseeable future, the language of precisely telling computers what you wanted to do is coding. It doesn't mean you should write code by hand. Writing code by hand is becoming obsolete, right? Really, don't do that. But get AI to write code for you. And people can do that, would be more effective and more powerful and have more fun.
If we're that early, where a decade's time, we're still going to be looking and identifying areas where it can improve meaningfully, do we have enough money to fund both the energy and the compute requirements for that 10-year period? Sam Altman has said he needs $1 trillion. He needs the energy of Japan. If we're 10 years out before we have still not that much improvement, do we have the money to fund it?
I think we'll see plenty of improvement over the next 2 years. But I think we still won't be done getting even more improvements 10 years from now. One place where it's super promising is AI-assisted coding. So we're seeing real productivity gains, real returns. It's really changing the way software is written. It's really been fantastic. Frankly, so many of my friends, coding is so much more fun with AI to help us out than without. So we are seeing returns, just to be clear. But we still won't be done growing this, 10 years from now.
But if you look at the TAM, the secret to success in AI investing is, will we see a transition from software budgets to human labor budgets, to software budgets? And if we have that, then holy grail, me and you will make a lot of money with our funds, and fantastic news, because the TAMs have massively increased, or the spend's massively increased. If we're like, hey, we're not going to actually lose any people, then actually we don't see that transition from human labor budget to software. Do you think we won't see that transition?
So to me, the question is AI mostly for cost savings or is it for growth? And I know that, it's difficult to change workflows. A lot of companies tend to think cost savings, but maybe here's the problem. There's actually one pattern I see. Let's say I have a work task that has, 5 steps, right? And let's say each step takes 20% of my effort. Maybe I'm, underwriting approvals, do I approve this loan or not, right? So let's say for simplicity, there are 5 steps, each takes 20% of effort. if you can automate one of those steps, it's a 20% cost savings, which is really nice. It could be great if you're a low margin business, but it doesn't feel like a game changer. So what I find is that the more valuable users of AI, it often requires rethinking that workflow. And the pattern I see is instead of taking a 20% cost savings, which you could do, that's fine, nothing wrong with that. The two patterns to then getting growth is either do more or do it faster. So in the case of underwriting, making loans, if instead of saving 20% of my human labor, if I can now rework the workflow to turn around my decision-making time. So instead of someone needing to wait, 2 weeks before a loan officer looks at it, but we can just give you an initial answer in 10 minutes. That changes the product and lets you drive growth. So that's a faster pattern. And then there's also the more pattern. So another example, there are a lot of, businesses that could do high touch, say customer service only for expensive high-end clients, right? But if you can now serve a much larger group of people, or let's say financial advice, instead of giving high-touch financial advice to a small group of people, if we can now deliver that quality of service to a lot more people, then that again changes the product and lets you drive growth. So instead of cost savings, if AI lets you do something way faster, or lets you take a task and do it 1,000 times more. Instead of serving a small number of people, let's serve a lot more people because it's now economic to do so. These are the two patterns I've seen to drive value increases. And I think that will be important for unlocking a lot of this GP growth.
You said economic to do so. Do you think it's crucial that we see vertical ownership in terms of NVIDIA own models as well as chip layer? And we're seeing Facebook build out data centers more than anyone. We're seeing everyone build out data centers. Is it important that we own every layer of the stack? Or actually, will we see individual participants own horizontal layers of the stack?
I think this will evolve over time. I'm going to make an analogy. In the early days of, say, the computing industry, it was the vertical players that won because, if you want to connect the keyboard to your computer motherboard, which has a CPU, is it okay if your keyboard has a, plus minus 5 volts and your CPU has some other voltage? Is that okay or not? So we didn't know where are the API boundaries, or if your CPU has memory laid out a certain way, a compute and your math accelerator, they needed to interoperate with each other. So before we wound up having a clear conception of where to draw lines and whether the API boundaries, the integrated players, IBM back in the day, could solve all the problems and build valuable working products. But as the industry matured, we started to have standards. Like, for example, now we have a USB standard. Before there were other standards. So now you make a computer, someone else makes a keyboard, we plug them together, and it all works. So when an industry is immature, it turns out where to draw those boundaries to let different participants do their part and have it still interoperate, that's less clear. But then as the industry matures and there's more standards for if I want to publish a compressed LM model on the internet, what's the file format for that? It's starting to see more standards, then that makes it easier for kind of individual players to do something and still have it fit into the broader ecosystem.
So do you think then like Zuck and Sam are right to be spending as much as they are on data centers? Or should they be patient and wait for the maturation of the industry where they can then be horizontal?
I think clearly OpenAI's investments have paid off to date. It is possible to overinvest at some point, but I don't know if that is the point. And then I think also the financial instruments being used by many players to shift risks around have been really interesting. I find that overly used, complex use of financial instruments to shift risk is sometimes, increases the risk of there being a bubble at some point. So that's something to watch out for.
Do you worry about the circular deals?
It's something to keep an eye on. I'm not alarmed by them, but it is, I think things could be more frothy or less frothy. Things could be more of a bubble and less of a bubble. And these are signs of things feeling a little bit more bubble-ish.
When does a sign turn into a big concern for you with these?
I think you mentioned the Sequoia article on the $600 billion problem of AI. I am concerned about that. But it's interesting. My concern for different layers of the stack is different. So what I'm seeing is for the application layer, there is very clear ROI. I think it's fantastic. So someone else train these models who can build applications for, $100,000 or $1 million and start generating ROI. And then I think it is calibrating to the right level of infrastructure investment that is tricky. But having said that, it is also at the same time very clear that we do need more electricity, more data centers, and more semiconductors. That too is very clear. So we should be investing a lot, and I'm glad we are. But what exactly is the right amount to invest? I think that's the tricky question. It should be a lot, though.
Do you get annoyed by the bubble discussion?
I don't get annoyed by the bubble discussion. I do get annoyed by the hype. I don't know, when regulators are calling me up and saying, hey, we heard AI could lead to human extinction. Thankfully, much less of that now than a couple of years ago. Then kind of like, and then instead the conversation should be, how can we upskill the workforce? Where can we invest? Not like, how do we slow this thing down? I think the hype has really distorted public perception of AI. Oh, and one downside of the hype too is, without public support of AI, things slow down. So for example, actually, one of my friends works a lot with high school students. And he told me that he was talking to a girl, a high school student, that he was talking to her about maybe pursuing a career in AI. And she said, you know what? I heard AI could have something to do with human extinction. I don't want to have anything to do with that. And so this hype turned a high school girl away from working on AI at a time where it'd be so promising for them to leap into AI. And I think this really causes people to make weird decisions, both at the individual school student level, as well as at the community level, where when the community, shuts down building out a data center that could be good for the community and good for the world, I think that's also unfortunate.
I'd love to move to a quick fire round where I say a short statement, but kind of staying on that thread, because the first question is, what's your biggest advice to educational institutions to make sure they equip students for a generation of AI?
Embrace it, update curricula, teach them as much AI as possible. Students are going to live in a world where they will be using AI and having it help them. Got to teach students to do that. I think it'll be different for different fields, but one thing that is clear is get all your students to learn to code.
What's one thing you've changed your mind about AI in the last 12 to 18 months?
I think my favorite tools keep changing. If you ask me, every 3 months over the last year, what my favorite coding tool is, my answer would have kept on changing.
Do you think Anthropic will beat OpenAI in the coding wars?
Really hard to say. So OpenAI has a very strong consumer brand, and that's very defensible. In contrast, developers are more likely to switch coding tools on a dime. So I love Cloud Code. I think it's fantastic, but I find myself using OpenAI Codex much more over the last month. I think OpenAI Codex has actually gained real momentum. And then I'm also keeping an eye on Gemini CLI, which I think is also getting better, maybe at a faster rate than people have given them credit for. So the coding dev tools and the API tools market, the moat there is weaker than having a strong consumer brand. So I think that's something that, companies have to sort out.
Tell me, what was your biggest takeaway from Baidu? It's such a different company to anything that we're used to in the West. What was your biggest takeaway?
I really appreciated the speed and intensity of Baidu, and also of the China ecosystem. I think it's really unfortunate that in some parts of the United States, advising someone to work hard, is viewed as politically incorrect or something.
In Europe, I'm chastised for it.
Okay. All right. Great. Hopefully the European viewers won't hate me or hate us both for that. I think, frankly, I wish, people could work 4 hours a week and be wildly successful. But the practical reality is when people work hard, they get more done. Now, I want to acknowledge that not everyone in every point of their life is in a position to work hard. So, the week after my kids were born, I didn't work that hard. I took time off, spent time with the kids, right? For more than a week. And I think we need to respect people in all walks of life, including people that for whatever reason are not in a position to work hard at that moment. But if someone wants to work hard, go, quote Steve Jobs, make a dent in the universe, let's empower them and celebrate that. If someone, for whatever situation, can't work hard, let's also, respect that and maybe celebrate that. But I think this is a moment in time where there's so much stuff we could build people that work hard to learn a lot and build things will accomplish a lot.
Did you do 996?
The term 996 wasn't an explicit term that I use. I find that right these days I work, I really love what I do. It really doesn't feel like work, but I would, on a lot of my weekends, I'm sitting in a coffee shop coding away because it's the most fun thing I could do on a Saturday. So I actually don't bother to keep track of my hours. It's probably a lot.
What's the hardest transition element moving from operator to investor?
Oh, one thing about AI fund, yes, we call ourselves a fund, but frankly, the way we run the fund day to day, we act much more like operators than investors. AI Fund's a venture studio, and I believe our skill set is actually in building, not just in, capital asset allocation or whatever. So we work really hard to screen ideas. We talk to customers. I'm sometimes on customer calls myself, and then we bring in founders to work alongside us. We're reviewing the product, giving feedback on the product, arguing about pricing. So where my day-to-day life is much more operator. And yes, eventually we have to do the financial diligence, and so I write a check and do follow-on. We do all that, but a lot more.
I'm really sorry, Andrew. Then, are you a fund or are you an incubator?
So we call ourselves a venture studio or a venture builder. The term, we don't, incubators usually bring in founders that already have an idea. We go earlier than that. We often work with our investors and partners to come up with an idea. And only after we have an idea, then we go and try to find the best founder to co-build, to co-found the company with us. So we don't call ourselves an incubator.
How much ownership do you have then when you make those original investments and seed the company?
Depends. We end up with some common stock for the sweat equity of building the company. And then we usually, our first check-in is usually like $1 million at a $4 million cap. So kind of 20% ownership or safe.
And so we're basically getting 20 to 25% ownership on entry with a couple of common.
Yeah, plus some common for the sweat equity.
Totally get you. What do you think is the biggest?
But to me, the reason we do this is because I find it. While there are VCs that do the competitive deal flow thing, they make a lot of money that way. I think my team's biggest contributions is not fighting over hot deals. It is finding ideas and creating companies that would not exist, but for the fact that we and a founder got together to co-found it together. So I think we just create more value in the world by creating new companies, rather than only discovering hot companies to try to, put money into.
What concerns you most today, Andrew? I love your optimism and your open-mindedness. What concerns you on the flip side?
The difficulty of bringing everyone along with us. In previous waves of economic disruption, like when our nations went from mainly agriculture to non-agriculture, someone that was a farmer could keep farming until they retired, but the kids had to learn a different trade, maybe move to the city or whatever. The change is so fast this time round that we need people that are alive today to learn new skills, as opposed to we need their kids to learn new skills. And that's actually very challenging. And historically, I don't think we've ever been good at that.
You do a lot of interviews, Andrew. You speak to many journalists. I'm not a journalist. I've never actually had a job. Do you find the quality of interviewers that ask you questions good?
I think media has an important role to play to curate and disseminate knowledge. I think the quality of questions that reporters are asking has been very clearly trending up over time. But there is still the hype element of it that keeps on distorting the information ecosystem. Unfortunately, there are financial incentives and, regulatory capture, legislative benefit types of incentives to certain types of help, to certain types of hype. And there's actually one pattern that I've seen. I won't name any companies, but I find that there are companies with something to lose whose statements over time have become more moderated. So, I find that as your established company, you just say more sensible things. But there are some companies I think are at greater existential risk. And I find those companies, some of those companies that I don't want to name, to be the worst sources of hype because they've got less to lose. Let's just say a bunch of random stuff.
In many respects, it's a lashing out in desperation, I think. When you look at a Demis, say, obviously a brilliant leader, or you look at a Sam even, or a Dario, all of them I think have moderated their positions significantly with the maturing of their companies.
Yeah. Yeah. No comment on individuals, but I think that when you have something to lose, you say more sensible things. But when your company faces greater existential risk, you sometimes people say weird things for fundraising.
I like to finish on a tone of optimism. What single thing are you most excited for when you look forward to the next decade? So for me, for example, my mother's got MS. I think we'll have incredible medical discoveries in some diseases that we haven't really made much advancements in for years. That excites me. What excites you?
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about your mother.
Thank you.
What excites me, I want to empower everyone to build with AI. I think the distance between you having an idea and building it is now much shorter. And we need not just software engineers to be creating. So in the future, I hope that a lot of people, instead of saying, is there an app for that? They'll say, I built an app for that. And instead of just being a software user, there'll be a software creator. And when you get there, then people all around the world will be much more empowered, get more done, have more fun.
Andrew, this has been such a joy to do. Thank you so much for putting up with my prying and my pressing. You've been amazing, and I really appreciate the time.
Now, I really enjoy your show, so it's a privilege to be here, Harry.